Hello there, this is Trunks for you, or Nerdy Geeky, and today I just want to talk about Thor's hammer and the physics of it. There's a big thing going on, and there's lots of talks, it's been around for a long time now, about the physics of Thor hammer, and obviously only people who are worthy enough to wield it can pick it up. But if Thor was to be picked up by, say, someone like the Incredible Hulk, whilst he was holding his hammer, does that technically mean that the Hulk picked up his hammer, even though the Hulk can't pick up his hammer without Thor there? Personally, I think that this question even answers itself, because say I haven't read the Thor comics, but if you go on things that you've seen in the Avengers and other the Marvel Universe films, Thor at one point puts his hammer on top of Loki and holds him down to the Bifrost, and you can actually see it like bend his armor slightly. It's that heavy. Although that's a little bit inconsistent. Maybe Loki's arm was just easily bent. I mean, the stuff it's made out of in real life anyway isn't exactly hard stuff. So if you go on something like that, though, I think the Incredible Hulk can't pick it up on his own, as in the Avengers 1, but Thor can pick it up and then get on top of the Incredible Hulk and hold him to the neck with it. It obviously shows that the hammer, being a magic hammer anyway from Asgard, and anybody that can pick it up can have the strength of Thor. It shows that once the hammer accepts the wielder and it is picked up, it likely, in respect to the person's strength, becomes about as heavy as a hammer of that size probably would be. The fact that you'd be imbued with Thor's strength and abilities anyway shows that you'd be able to pick up that hammer whether it was heavier or not. And throughout the universe and throughout the films, it has been shown that the hammer can recognise whether it's being picked up by a person or whether it's being put down. I mean, in the new Avengers film, it's put down on a desk, on a glass table, in fact. Even when people are trying to pick it up off this table, it still stays on the table. It doesn't fall through the table. It doesn't become super heavy when someone picks it up. It almost is the magic of the hammer, is that if someone tries to pick it up who is not worthy of the hammer and Thor's power, it almost fixes itself in a particular space. And when I say space, I don't mean just general space. I mean like as in time and space, and it fixes itself within that space. So like it fixed itself to the space above the table in Age of Ultron, but it didn't become super heavy and crash through the table or crash through the floor, crash through the building, even, you know. And the same thing with Loki. Like when it was put on top of Loki, Loki was in contact with it. Therefore, it would fix itself to space and hold Loki down to the Bifrost. But again, in Thor 2, when he walks into when he walks into the apartment in London, he hangs it up on a coat rack, and it doesn't pull the rack down. It doesn't go through the floor, smash through the floor. It seems to be the weight of a regular hammer, because it's almost like it knows that it's not being picked up, that it's just being placed in an area. And at the end of the day, we are talking about a magic hammer here, but I do not believe the transition of properties mean that if you're picking up someone who has picked up the hammer means that you have picked up the hammer and you will get the strength of Thor and all the abilities of Thor. I don't believe that is the case in this case, because it's not a regular hammer. But I mean, if you put yourself in that position with just, say you've got a regular hammer, you've been I don't know, you've been building something like a shelf, and you've got a hammer, and then your big brother or your dad or someone comes in and picks you up and puts you on their shoulders. I mean, you know, that hammer doesn't suddenly become weightless. Like, it's not, they haven't picked up that hammer. You still wield that hammer. You can still move your arm. You know, it exerts force on your arm. So, yes, transition of properties and la-di-da, that's very lovely, and I know they talked about this in the Big Bang Theory as well, but I think I'm also swinging towards an opinion that Mr. Sunday Movies on YouTube, by the way, he's a fantastic YouTuber. You should definitely check out his videos, and definitely subscribe. You can even find him in my favourites on my page. But yes, Mr. Sunday Movies, he proposed that that the hammer itself has a relative amount of sentience, and actually likened it to things like the ring in Lord of the Rings, which would open and close for whoever's finger it was on. and also call back to its master. It had a relative amount of sentience, and the hammer being a magic Asgardian hammer, maybe it's got a reasonable level of sentience where it knows if it's being picked up and wielded, and knows whether it's just being propped up on a hat rack or put down on a table. Also, though, I do believe that it's when a person comes in contact with it. I believe it's absolutely normal hammer until someone... I think that if the hammer was on a table and someone flipped the table, then the hammer would probably go flying off the table. But if someone tried to pick up the hammer off the table and break the table that way, then the hammer wouldn't move unless they were worthy of it. So that's my theory on the Thor hammer physics. And this is comic book physics at the end of the day, which is basically, if it kind of sounds like it works, then it's probably a real thing in comics. So yeah, I basically believe that the hammer knows if it's a person trying to wield it, and the magic or whatever it's imbued with takes effect once a person or a being or some sort of sentient tries to pick it up or tries to move it. But if it's just being placed down on something or being hung up somewhere, then no, it doesn't. And it doesn't need to take effect. It's just a regular weight of a regular hammer about that size, which, in all fairness, would still be pretty weighty. So the Incredible Hulk having infinite strength, because his strength is directly proportional to his anger, and he apparently has infinite anger, therefore he has infinite strength. If he can't pick it up, then there's obviously some sort of magic involved, holding it in place in a space within space, basically. So he can't pick it up. But as soon as Thor picks it up, and then he can pick up Thor, he's not picking up the hammer. Thor's got the hammer. He's released the hammer from that space because it's accepted him as the user. And then, of course, the Hulk can pick up him, and so on and so forth. So that's my explanation of the physics of Thor's hammer. I don't believe that there's this kind of loophole. I don't even think there's any kind of contradictory evidence to it. I think that it is that plain and simple, and in the films I think it's actually quite obvious. I think people are almost picking at things or trying to create scenarios that don't really work. I think it's pretty obvious that it knows when someone's trying to pick it up and wield it, or at least it's evident when someone's trying to pick it up and wield it. Maybe it's to do with a biological touch, and it's evident when it's not being moved, it's just being rested on something, it's a regular weight. That's the theory. If you've got a different theory, or you've read the comics and there's anything in the comics that contradicts what I've said, please put it in the comment section below, and I would love to read it. And if we get a lot of contradictory evidence, I'll make another video and I'll talk about the evidence that has been posted. But thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.